So in this random palm reading, I'm looking at a very sort of psychic palm here, and I say it's psychic palm, and that's one of the seven categories of Darpantigny and Desborellis's system of seven that was conceived in the mid-19th century. It's a water hand, as far as Fred Gettings is concerned, as far as his system of four takes us, and that makes someone emotional, sensitive, creative, intelligent, artistic. But more than that, more specifically, we have a very narrow base of the palm. It's a long palm as well. Let's draw a proper little shape around that. I mean, that's still terrible. The Saturn finger is almost as long as the palm itself with a narrow base. So we have here a psychic palm, and this is someone who has an innate ability. They can't help it. They sense the world around them, the seen and the unseen, in a way that can't really be articulated and is best expressed through creativity and art. So often psychic hands like this are interior designers, they're fashion designers, they are artists of some variety, they're models. Quite often and although psychic hands are quite often very sort of fear-driven people, they live in the future, they're very anxious often, and as a result they have their bodies, having these nervous dispositions, are quite often subjected to having poorer immune systems and poorer vitality, because this sort of constant way of thinking has a knock-on effect on the body. And so they're more prone to autoimmune issues and for some reason throat and lung issues as well. But because of these innate sort of creative and artistic abilities, they often end up in sort of high pressure, high stressful industries like fashion and the modeling industries. So it's a strange one, because they're not actually suited, but at the same time they are, to those industries and to those roles. So there's a few things going on here. Look at the way Apollo and Mercury sort of drop off the edge of the palm here, and this shows that there were issues in childhood around self-development in terms of how this person feels about themselves in relation to others. And it's classic child-related difficulties, and quite often it's when, Mercury being this low set, it's not a short Mercury finger, because when you compare the length of Mercury, that was a fine line, there was no need to get rid of that, with the overall length of the two bottom phalanges of Apollo, it is actually lengthy enough, so that's okay. It's not actually short, but it is very low set, and that low set Mercury is often a sign that it's Alder's inferiority complex. So it's possibly there were some childhood related difficulties around being compared to siblings unfairly, or just generally treated unfairly, and it's hard to say exactly what the situation was. I can only sort of throw out examples, but let's say that this person was an only child, and but they had lots of cousins, and they were treated unfairly by their aunt and uncles, whereas let's say that the aunt and uncles treated their own children more favorably, let's say. And for us, particularly for someone as sensitive as this, it's going to have a long-lasting effect on them and their sense of self-worth and themselves in relation to the rest of the world and what is possible for them to achieve. So to another child, the way they were treated as a child might not to anyone else, it might not have affected them in this same way, but this has had a long-lasting effect on this person. And as a result, they probably have relationship difficulties to this day, which is very unfortunate for this person. I wonder if they had a poor relationship with their mother. I'm not certain. However, I think because of the way they view themselves, they might have this sort of overcompensatory desire to sort of dominate in relationships because of the way that they were treated as a child. I'm not 100% certain, and I'm no psychologist, so my kind of amateur conclusions here are quite potentially dangerous. So take me with a pinch of salt. But we do have here a long Jupiter finger. It's just long enough, which is a good sign, considering the difficulties this person had during their childhood. So they definitely come a long way, and this is a testament to their character and their self-development. Saturn and Jupiter are, they're equal standings with each other, and they're both a good length. So this person has an excellent sense of drive and ambition, and knows what it is that they are good at and should be doing. Headline starts very high on Jupiter here, and thankfully the headline doesn't droop too far down into lunar, otherwise we'd be at risk of higher risk of depression. The headline ends, it's not too long, which is good because it shows us that this person, it's more grounding. It shows us a bit more sort of practicality to this person's nature, which is needed because what's shown here with the overall length and width of the base of the palm here is an unpredictable and a kind of an unpractical nature. So to have this headline here, so I was looking at my notes I've made, to have this kind of, it's not a short headline, but to have it not long is helpful for this person because they require that extra grounding. And I think that this sort of self-development of, I don't know what's going on with this image, the self-development that they've managed to achieve has also helped them in this grounding as well. There is still a tendency, because I can see in another image that I've got of this person's palm, that there is a bit of a fork. It does tend to droop down into lunar. So there is a feeling of indecisive melancholy at times. However, as I say, their personal journey of self-development has helped them in grounding, and this is much needed grounding, and they're not thinking too much about things, and I can tell because the thumb is short. It's on the short side, which is again a good thing because it means that they're not overthinking, they're not holding a grudge for too long, they're not holding on to the past too much, which is good because psychic hands often do, and this is helpful. Now Saturn, I notice, does lean, it's very straight until the tip, and it does tend to lean a little bit into Apollo, perhaps a bit too much, and again this might be because of double messages provided as a child, which can kind of split the mind and body into two in a way, because it leaves them with this permanent sense of uncertainty, and that could have led to this person's feelings of indecision in adulthood. However, it's not extreme, it's just a little bit there. I think it's linked to this the periods of difficulty in their childhood. And psychic hands, often they have their lifelines and their headlines are kind of wrought with chains and islands because of, as I say, the feelings and thoughts that they soak up of others around them, and this permanence of living in the future, this permanent state of anxiety that they tend to live in. Now, this is the same person's palm, and you can see here with much more clarity. I have no doubt that this person has artistic skills. It's not to say that they work in necessarily a creative industry, but they certainly work with others, and I think for others. I think they work in the social care sector. Now, the first things that I notice, we've got here the tasseling of the headline and the lifeline to begin with, along with this very low set Mercury. And again, this is classic childhood related difficulties through no fault of their own, of course. This is as a result of a lack of guidance or poor guidance from parental figures during latency, as in from 0 to 6 years old. Now, we can see here at the age of around 23, we've got here some islands, and it's quite a spat of islands. This person has experienced quite a few difficulties throughout their whole life, really. It just seems they go from one stressful scenario into another. But the good news is that happiness, life starts at 40. Now, in a lot of my videos, I kind of have used the guideline that the fate line, where it meets the headline, is around the age of 35. However, I shouldn't really endorse this idea because it's a guideline, and on some people's palms, the left palm, where it meets the fate line, could be at a completely different place on the right. So it's not accurate. And for some people, like this person, the headline starts very high up on the palm. And so where this person's fate line or career line meets the headline for this person is actually more around the age of 39. So a little bit on timing in palmistry. Timing is one of the most difficult things to get right. And as a result, because of the amount of readings that I do and the, just how little time I've got, I tend to just sort of guesstimate, and it's good enough because it's so difficult that even, looking and using formulas and measuring and cross-referencing, it's still never completely accurate. And even by spending lots of time doing it, it's still, even then, it's not always going to be accurate. So I just tend to not bother or worry too much about it. But I just take into account the lifeline is the most accurate measure of time in the palm, and as is the career line or fate line. That's the second most accurate measure of time in the palm. And the headline and the heart line are not accurate. And although you might be able to corroborate an event on the heart line with the lifeline, an emotional disturbance, for example, you can't then use that as a frame of reference accurately on the heart line. It just doesn't work. Not in my opinion, anyway. I've never found, there are some equations and things out there, but it just doesn't really tend to work. The fate line, you can measure this in terms of about 77 years. And, if you take, if you divide that exactly in half, generally it lands in the middle of the palm, and that's around the sort of 35 mark, and that's normally where the headline crosses. So that works about right. For this person, they're a little bit older. So I'll do a video on timing in palmistry, timing events in palmistry. I've been putting it off a little bit because it's just one of the most argued about subjects in palmistry, and everyone has their own sort of specific thoughts and feelings after a while. Each palmist, they develop their own ideas, and I've seen some American palmists that have, that devise their own ways of doing things, and I just don't agree with everyone. I've got my own way of doing things, and that's that. So, each to their own. So for this person in their career, there are a couple of obstacles, one at about 40, one at about 42, 43, but the career and life in general looks very happy after this time. And it isn't until they reach the age of about 50 that there is one obstacle in particular. Could be health related. It's difficult to say what that could be. It could be lung related, but it's okay. They will be okay. And you can see it here on the heart line. There's a few periods where they'll need to accept some support from others and within their employment role as well. And I think for the most part, they really need to avoid stressful situations. And on that note, they will be okay physically. I've got no concerns. On that note, I do think they worry about their mental health. And they do have they are a bit prone to depression. And that's because of, that's what a wonderful headline. Excellent creative, imaginative reserves here. And Luna's is very well formed. They haven't got an outright desire to, an overt desire to push their ideas of their creative ideas onto the rest of the world. It's not too pushy, is what I mean. But perhaps they should be more pushy with this. I think that this person could really do with strengthening their own inner voice and learning how to articulate their emotions with those they're closest to, because they're very good at picking up on the emotions and thoughts and feelings of others around them in a way that I don't even think that they necessarily understand. But if they could learn how to kind of bridge the gaps between what's going on up here and translating that and articulating it to those closest to them, I think that will actually have positive knock-on effects on strengthening themselves, developing themselves, and helping with expressing themselves. I do wonder what this person does as a role, and I know I've said already I think they work in social care, but I'm starting to have doubts now. I'm wondering if this person is a model. I think they are a very attractive person. It's funny, isn't it, looking at a person's palm and just sort of making that assumption. But look at this headline. Sorry, I meant to say heart line. Look at the heart line and the curve of it. Look at just how wonderful that curve is. Overall, it's quite a low set heart line and it rises sharply. And this shows us quite a few things. The thumb is low set as well. They are a very caring person. They're a bit of a humanitarian. I think they're probably an animal lover. And the heart line like this with such a sharp well, it's not sharp, but it rises quite high and it starts quite low. It shows us that they can be a little bit of a pushover for a sob story, perhaps. And that's not to say that they're naive by any stretch. That doesn't look too short. But what it does show us is, and I like to, this is my own little thing I do with a heartline. I make a string. I imagine the heartline as a bow. I attach a string from end to end, and I ask myself, how far can this arrow fly? And the further that arrow can fly, the larger the capacity for a deeply loving relationship with, in all, that encompasses all areas of what a relationship entails. So this person has quite a high sex drive and requires a healthy sexual relationship, as well as physical affection, and needs from a partner someone who is just as giving as they are themselves. I suppose I could say that for just about anyone. In any case, what this shows us is how deep the capacity for love is, and that's just my personal silly little heartline Cupid's arrow equation. There we go, I've coined it. So early 20s, you can see here from the lifeline, a line rising right up onto Jupiter, and this shows us an ambition towards what it is they want to do in their career. They've made great efforts here in working towards a role where they are in a position of authority, teaching perhaps. So this is obviously the left hand. It's showing us this person has a desire to work in the public eye, or at least with others and or for others. It's often associated with careers in creativity. The success line also seems to stem, well, just a little bit beyond the heart line, it seems. And it does sort of fork outwards very nicely. So they've got a good idea, as I think they're probably earning okay money at the moment. There's a little bit of a, why does my image keep jumping around? There's a little bit of a square on Jupiter, and you know, this ambition line is pointing towards that, and that's why I think this person, you know, wants to head towards a role of teaching in some way. But there's a link between that and creativity. And then I've also said, you know, works in social care. So I'm a bit all over the place with my prediction here. So one thing I've not pointed out, which is kind of obvious, I mean, you know, what's the first thing you notice about this palm that stands out? Well, the large gap between the life and the headline. This shows us impatience and radical thinking. It shows us that this is a very large gap between the life and the headline. It's more commonly seen in water hands, that is a long palm and long fingers, and it shows us there's a disconnect between the the heads, between decisions and the life energies. So it's almost as though impatience can sometimes get in the way. This person acts before they think at times, and you know, it could be that they don't quite have. I'm just sort of trailing off here because I'm also thinking, well, actually, this person does have a good Jupiter finger, look at the length of it, it's longer than Apollo. So that helps with decision making. It sort of negates the negatives of that space between the life and the headline. And if this person does work in fact, creative or artistic industry, well, that's excellent, because this radical thinking, along with this, the broad top to the palm, it's wider, the palm is wider at the top than the base, and again this helps the long Jupiter finger, and the space between the life and the headline. This helps with it because it's sort of, if they are working in a creative field, they're going to come up with ideas and inspiration that no one else is, and they'll be a bit of a pioneer in this way. And just looking at Apollo there, the tip of Apollo, it does seem to sort of represent, it's kind of spatulate when compared to the rest of the tips. Mercury is conic. They have an ability to speak their mind in the moment, as is Saturn. That's good as well. But having a kind of a spatulate Apollo there, that also shows us an ability to create tangible physical end results. So again, this does suggest this person is potentially artistic and creative. Now look at Jupiter. That's a very sort of pointed Jupiter finger. It's long as well. I would, I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that this person in some way is above others in the role that they're in. They're a kind of leader, and they're showing, demonstrating, teaching others, passing on information, and they're very able to read the room, and they're using the skills and experience that they have in working with others, in creating with others, to kind of pass this information. I think they're very good at doing that. I think where they might struggle is in personal relationships. And I think with this kind of, this predisposition to depression, and the many sort of stress lines that I can see here, I think I definitely advise to take, I forgot what it was for a second there, it's potassium. You can take potassium, it's a natural antidepressant when you're feeling low. So when we are upset and we cry out these salty tears, and that's the body's way of trying to regulate potassium, and it puts us out of balance. When we're depressed and we cry a lot, we are at a sort of potassium imbalance, and so taking potassium can sort of regulate that again. There's no harmful effects of doing this. There's no contraindications. And I highly recommend it. It doesn't work for everyone, but it particularly works well with water hands, long palm, long fingers, because we're more sensitive. I say I'm not quite a water hand, but water hands are more sensitive. So homeopathic remedies can work better for water palms, especially when they're feeling low, with these antidepressant pharmaceutical alternatives. I'll put it in the description. Kali Phos. You can get it in the New Era range, and it works a treat. I know it does because I used to sell it in a health food shop I worked in, and I would have customers coming back, and they would say, well, they would say, well, I've run out and I can already feel that mood swings are coming on and things. So even if it's placebo, well, whatever, still works, doesn't it? So the other kind of bit of advice I want to give is to try to think before you leap in situations, especially where health and emotions are concerned. When others are trying to point out mistakes or criticize, hold back those initial feelings of hurt and just tell yourself in the moment that hang on a minute, just tell yourself to hang on and recognize that actually it's only through mistakes that we learn, and it's important to hear these things and try not to take it to heart too much. For repairing the damage done to you as a child, if you're watching this, I'm not sure if you will, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, might help in recognizing your own self value in comparison, when comparing yourself to others, because that side of you, that psychological damage, it has had a lasting effect on you, and the way that you compare yourself to others, the way you value yourself to others. And sometimes that can mean that you give too much of yourself, and other times it can mean that you put a wall up. Sometimes the relationships with our parents are irreparable, or there is just no way of fixing those, and often that's not down to us. And in repairing, the only way of repairing what's left, or the memory of those bridges between us and our parents, is in repairing ourselves and mending those broken bits of ourselves from a long time ago, and learning to love yourself. So there are ways through therapy and meditation to do this. So I hope that all makes sense, and I hope that this reading's been enjoyable. It's always a fascinating palm to read when I get them, these sensitive palms. So I learn every time. And particularly when I look at these sort of more psychic palms, I tend to feel what they're feeling, and it can be quite powerful, quite weighty. Sometimes it's a bit upsetting. So, looking at the left hand here, you can see that the life and the head line, the gap has grown a bit bigger. So it's almost as though they have become a bit more impatient and a little bit reckless, even as they've grown older. So that advice around thinking before you leap, just make sure to do that. Not that I foresee any sort of accident necessarily. It's just it's more to guard yourself in your emotions, and your work life, really. So thank you for letting me read this palm. It's been fascinating, and yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you thought this was interesting, please give it a share, give it a like. See you on the next one.